Excellent.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gateway's online conversation cafe. And this is part of the series Not Eligible for PDD. Now what? In today's session, we're going to be talking to the center um, in terms of their pre-employment programs that they have available for folks under the age of 18. All right, so let's start with some introductions. Brady, can you tell us a little
Hi.
there?
Hi, I'm Brady Hughes. I've been with the Center for Autism for about 7 years now, while I was completing my undergrad studying recreation and recreational therapy. And I'm actually taking over for Gail Stanford on next Monday. So I'm kind of moving into those recreation roles. So I can answer some recreational questions, as we'll touch on it a little bit in our presentation, because that's often an area where our participants go because there's no PDD funding.
Desiree?
Hi, my name is Desiree Polyak. I am a program coordinator for the Teen and Adult division at the center. I've also been at the center for about 7 years now. Love it. I started there as a specialized services aide. So I started out working with the smaller children directly in their homes. And then I transitioned to a program called Quest for Independence that we'll touch on a little bit later in the PowerPoint presentation. And then I also spent some time in some of the pre-employment programs that we have. Employment Works and Community Works. So those we'll talk about a little more in depth, because Employment Works is one of those programs that you don't need PDD funding to be a part of. So we'll talk a lot about the importance of employment and that program throughout the presentation. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Eva?
I'm Eva Bochinsky. I'm the supervisor of Teen and Adult Services at the Center for Autism Services Alberta right now, and I'm actually also an occupational therapist. I also have a bit of a history with the center. I won't say for how long. It's been a long time. I've worked across all the lifespan as well. I started out as an OT working with the kiddos and in their homes, and then have made the transition into adults with the employment program. So I'm happy to be here to support Des and Brady and answer any questions that anybody might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Eva. And I just wanted to remind folks that that are watching this and are also attending live, that the reason why we have the center today for this conversation is quite often folks on the spectrum are not PDD eligible. And so right now with social distancing, and it's still occurring in different ways, but it's still necessary and important. And what we wanted to do was bring the center in to talk a little bit about the life skills programs, the pre-employment programs that they have, and get a little deeper into the design. And those will be some of the questions I have for you guys, is a little bit of the design of the program, the reasoning, what are some hurdles that you think youth experience, and lastly, there are always going to be wait lists, and if not, there are those that may be still hesitant to come out to the center for these programs. So we want to talk a little bit about how can caregivers emulate pieces of these programs in their home to the best of their ability, while we still facing some restrictions. So I'm going to maybe ask some questions related to that as well. Okay, awesome. Desiree, did you want to share your screen and then we can go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks, Sahana. So just bear with me while I share the screen. So I'll share my PowerPoint presentation with everybody, but I have my notes on the side. So if you see me looking away, I'm just reading my own notes. Also, I talk with my hands a lot, so I apologize if that gets distracting. I'll try and keep them below the screen. Okay. So Okay. All right. So during today's presentation, we're going to kind of highlight a lot of the programs that the center has for teens and adults, supporting individuals throughout their lifespan, on their employment journey and beyond. So for those who aren't familiar with the center, I'll just give a little bit of background information. We were founded in 1997, and we were the first children's autism service provider in the city. And we're the only service provider in the province that's accredited by CARF, which is the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, for our work in behavior consultation services. We have about 140 employees, 100 volunteers, and in 2013, the center expanded their model to serve clients across the lifespan and across the spectrum. So that was done in response to parent requests. We realized that our SS children were aging, and there were no autism-specific service providers delivering adult services in the city. So that was in response to an unmet needs group. So currently, we provide services to teens and young adults in a variety of ways. Pre-employment programming, which would be employment works and community works. We have a Quest for Independence, which is a life skills programming Monday to Friday, where we operate out of 3 community apartments, 1 at the center and 2 out in Strathcona. We have the Peers program, which is social skills. We have Peers for teens, Peers for young adults, and a variety of recreational and leisure groups, which Brady will get into a little bit later on in the presentation. Okay, so we wanted to be here today to share a little bit how the center is working to support individuals with ASD in their teen and adult years. We want to share how the center is focusing on improving the life of people with ASD through educational, social, and recreational opportunities and programs that prepare teens and adults for employment. So why would we focus on employment programs? Up to 80% of individuals with ASD are either or underemployed. And that leads to a decreased quality of life. So a decreased quality of life, it's lower for people with mental health conditions, for those reporting higher autism characteristics, but it's higher for those who are employed, for those who receive support at home or support at work, and for those in a relationship, interestingly. So just a little bit of a study here. There was a 2015 longitudinal study that looked at adult outcomes for children diagnosed with ASD, and they found some interesting statistics. Of their sample, only 42% were currently employed, 38% had never been employed before, and of their group, only 18% had found employment independently. Underemployment was really common for those who were employed, but I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into employment works. So does being employed matter? Absolutely, absolutely it does. Being employed leads to an increased quality of life. It leads to an increased sense of belonging, and decreased levels of anxiety and depression. So it's really important for us to facilitate those programs that allow people to build those employment skills. There's a few factors that independently predict employment for people on the spectrum, and most of those are daily living skills. I'll touch on those in a little bit more detail when I talk about the Quest program. But there's a assessment tool that can predict a lot of those things called the Weisman Activities of Daily Living scale. And that, if you score highly on that tool, that's the strongest predictor of employment outcomes. So that tool measures things like, it's very specific. So it can measure things like in the kitchen, can you use a can opener? Can you use the stove? And it goes all the way into things like budgeting. So can you write a budget on your own? Can you stay home alone? Those kind of things. So the take-home message here is that childhood and adult daily living and self-care skills predict employment, and often they predict employment above and beyond symptom severity or intellectual functioning, which is pretty interesting. So here's just a little graph that shows how large the gap is when you compare people on the spectrum to the general population in terms of employment. That's a massive gap, even between a group of people with other disabilities compared to a group of those with autism. It's pretty striking. Mm-hmm. And that employment gap, it widens even farther when you adjust for differences in functional skills and conversational ability. At the same time, though, some adults do become employed, even with more challenging levels of impairment. And that gives us hope for what might be possible with effective preparation through employment skill building programs like Employment Works or our social skills programs like Peers for Young Adults. So just a little bit more about what the research says when we talk about employment. Recent statistics indicate that 85% of people on the autism spectrum are either unemployed or underemployed, meaning that they might have a job, but if they have a degree, it's not they're not utilizing it. It means they're far too skilled for the position that they're currently occupying. So one study found that half of young adults with ASD only half had ever worked for pay outside the home in the first 8 years following high school, which is actually the lowest rate among disability groups, even when you control for things like the impairment severity and household income and social demographics, those kind of things. What CWC and EW&P programs try to do is to kind of bridge that gap and provide youth and young adults with ASD an opportunity to start preparing for the transition to adulthood and to develop those really fundamental skills for future employment. Research is suggesting that if young adults miss out on those rites of passages, either volunteering or having a part-time job while they're in high school, then they risk transitioning into a world of social exclusion, financial hardship, and significantly decreased quality of life. And that doesn't even address the significant burden that and stress that families can feel when they're supporting those individuals. So when we think about employment success at the center and throughout our programs, we think about finding the right match. So matching somebody's strengths with their interests, their personality, and the right employer. All of those things combined hopefully will lead to career success. So the right match would be the extent to which a particular job meets the individual's needs in terms of challenge, interest, comfort level, camaraderie in the office, status, hours, pay and benefits, those kind of things. All of those factors need to kind of come together in the right way in order to find the right match for someone's employment, just like anyone, right? I am at my current job and I've been there so long because it's the right match for me. Enough of a challenge, if the work is really interesting. Obviously, I find that my employer is the right employer for me. There's lots of office camaraderie, right? Like the center is the right match for me. So we try and apply that method to the clients that we serve. So just a little bit about what we've learned so far on this journey with hosting and facilitating these programs, especially with the Employment Works program. We found that in talking to these clients that we've served, a lot of their experiences have kind of confirmed the research that I touched on briefly before. We had a few who've come to us with degrees, either from NAIT, from the U of A, and if they are employed, most of them are employed in positions that are not using their degree. They've mentioned to us that they had a really hard time finding careers or keeping careers that matched their interests and matched their skill set. In addition to being underemployed, there's a large section that had never been employed before. They mentioned that it was hard for them to go through the job application process, not knowing how that really works, and maybe not getting the right amount of support, either at home or from teachers, that kind of thing. And they maybe weren't aware of the employment supports that you could get in the community from Gateway or from employabilities, those kind of things. So it was interesting to see that the research was confirmed in real life situations, like the cohorts that we're serving in Employment Works. We also found that some of our participants with comorbid disorders, generalized anxiety or social anxiety, those kind of things, they mentioned that those things that they're struggling with, aside from the autism, were what was causing some difficulties when searching for work. So through our employment programs, we try and give them a little bit of a script, or at least some base knowledge to kind of tackle some of these issues that they're facing in the workplace. We've had some pretty good feedback on that. They found that learning those skills was helpful. That way they have a kind of script to help them better problem solve on the spot in real life employment situations. So when I talk a little bit more about Employment Works, I'll describe how the program is structured. But essentially, they get to practice those skills in a classroom session, and then later on in the same week, we go to a job sampling site, and they get to practice those skills directly in a workplace environment, which is really cool. So we've got a lot of positive feedback about that. I just wanted to highlight how a little bit how our staff and the way the center approaches our programs. So our staff take a strength-based perspective, and we try to encourage our clients and our participants to see themselves through this lens as well. So just as an example of this, we have an activity in one of our Employment Work sessions that takes an inventory of all of their skills and all of their strengths, and then they can take home this physical list of all the things that they're good at, which I think is really helpful. So we can help them see that, yes, you have skills, you have strengths, there are things that you possess already. Without even the help of this program, there are things that you possess that make you desirable to employers. Things like punctuality, honesty, detail-oriented. loyal, understanding rules and sequences. The list of skills that our clients possess is long and extensive. That also kinds of lead into a little bit of we let them know that just because like you have all of these skills, which is fantastic, and it's definitely okay for you to be skilled in some ways and be building skills in other ways, because that is universal. That's not an ASD thing. Everybody has skills that they need to work on in an employment situation. So I think that's really useful for them to know as well. And myself and my staff, we kind of give some examples of our own struggles at work, just to kind of highlight that it's everyone. We all struggle, but we also all have skills that are useful for employment. So with that, I'll go into describing our employment-related programming just a little bit. So Employment Works National Program is federally funded through the CNEVE Family Foundation. That means that we send in an application to the federal government and they'll approve it. Employment Works really does serve that unmet needs group, those participants who aren't eligible for PDD funding, which is really fantastic. Community Works is for teens, 14 to 17 years. That one does require FSCD funding, as does Peers for Teens. Peers for Young Adults, however, does not, but it's a new program, so the funding for that has to come from the families and clients themselves. But you do not need to be eligible for PDD to apply for Peers for Young Adults. I'll touch a little bit on Plus for Independence. That program is a PDD funded program, but it teaches a lot of really great life skills and adaptive functioning skills that do pave the way for employment in the future. So I won't spend too much time on that one, but just as a FYI, I wanted to include it as well.
If I could just interrupt for 1 sec and just clarify that with CWC and Peers for Teens, they're definitely eligible if you have FSCD funding, but you can still apply for those. And some families will use other health insurance, or you can pay for it privately as well.
Thanks, Eva.
No problem.
So in addition to all those amazing pre-employment skills programs, we have a lot of fantastic recreational and social programming. Programming that covers things like physical activity, art, cooking, and minimally structured social programs, which are fantastic. Young adult social night, teen social night. We have some basketball. Active for Life is a gym program where they go to the gym together, lift weights, go on the track, do that kind of stuff. Really fantastic.
Excuse me, Desiree.
Yeah.
I love that we're moving into rec and social programming, but I just wanted to, do you mind going to the previous slide? I have some questions that I think would be handy to ask now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the Community Works program. So can you tell us a little bit about, what happens? So a caregiver calls you, like how does one register for that program? How often does it run? And can you kind of go into the details of what the options are?
Yeah, for sure. So CWC is a 14-week program. If you want to apply for CWC, we'll give our contact information at the end. Sure. And so all you'll have to do is send an inquiry about it, and we'll send that information off to the program coordinator for CWC. I believe they're running a cohort in the fall, Eva? Is that correct? Okay. So they're taking applications and intakes all the time.
Okay. And so typically what happens in that? Like what is the...
Like the
What,
structure of it?
yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. I can go through that now. Community
Sorry,
work.
sorry, were you going to go through it later?
Yeah, I do have a
Oh,
slide about it. Yeah, but if you wanted to hear about
yeah.
it before, that's okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought we were moving away from it, and I was like, no, 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 we need to still talk. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Sorry, that might have been confusing. This is just like a brief snapshot, but I'll go into each of these in a little more detail for sure.
That's fine. We can totally wait. I just didn't want to miss the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Problem.
Yeah, continue. Thanks.
No worries. Okay. Great. Our recreational programs. So the goal with all of these programs that we facilitate is just to provide youth and young adults with autism the same experience and opportunity for skill building that any typical Canadian youth would have. So as we discussed, a strong indicator of long-term job success are the employment-related experiences that we have as teenagers. So that early volunteer work, those part-time employment, even just having the responsibility of chores and taking care of things at home. Those things teach us about responsibility and dependability and appropriate workplace behavior. Most adolescents with neurodevelopmental disabilities, including ASD, don't get these experiences. So our programs can be a part of building an employment-ready foundation. I was going to give an example of, you know what, I'll give it now. I just wanted to give a little bit of a success story. So this is a CWC success story. We had one girl go through our CWC program, and we always tell these participants that even though the program has ended, they still have access to us. So if they want to email us with any questions, if they want us to look over their resume or be a reference, we're there for that. We're available. So this young lady contacted us after the program was done to get some help with her resume, which we provided. And then a little later on, she contacted us to be references for her as she was applying for a bunch of jobs, which we were very excited about and more than willing to do. And she ended up getting offers from a bunch of different places, which was fantastic because then she got to choose the right match from that group of employers. So we were very excited for her, and so yeah, so excited. She has kept in touch and let us know where she was working, and she's been there for a while now, and we're really proud of her. So that is that's a great success story and just a little example of what these programs can do.
Awesome.
Okay, I'll start with Employment Works. This is a much beloved program. I really enjoyed it. I love it so much. All of the staff talk about how even though we're only physically with them for about 12 weeks, we get so attached, and the group forms a really nice friendship, and everyone is really invested in each other's success. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So Employment Works offers training for adults with autism and other disabilities who want to practice and develop the essential skills necessary to get and keep a job.
Okay.
So Employment Works, we also incorporate peer mentors who are volunteers. We've had volunteers on the spectrum, volunteers who are neurotypical, but we kind of use them to as people who have been through the workforce. They can share a little bit of their employment journeys with those in our program, and in addition to having an impact on those volunteers, our community partners, who I'll talk a little bit more about later, they're businesses and employers within the community. And the nice thing for them is that they get direct experience integrating individuals with disabilities into their workplace.
Mhm.
So Employment Works is a 6-month program. 3 months of the first 3 months are structured sessions. So we have 2.5 hours of classroom session on a Wednesday, and then 2 hours of job sampling at an employer out in the community on Fridays. So we do 12 weeks of that. And then the second phase is called labor market participation. So I'll just jump to the next slide here. So structured learning focused on career exploration, employment readiness, and soft skill development. So those social skills that a lot of people don't think of when they think of employment, but are actually really important and a really necessary skill to have before you go into a workplace. And then job sampling is experiential learning for participants and employers in a variety of workplace sessions. So I'll just give a couple examples of the places that we go to with Employment Works for our community, our job sampling. We are partnered with Goodwill Industries, with No Frills, the grocery store, Greg's Distributors out on the West End, the Royal Glenora Club. We've gone to a few gyms, and we have a partnership with a company called Technology North, who give them experience with digitizing documents, which is really cool. So that is the first phase, job sampling and classroom session. And then phase 2 is where we would, labor market participation means that us as staff kind of take a step back and just, we operate in more of a supporting role for the participants. So this is when they are actively job seeking, and we are in the background giving them tips. We are helping them with their resumes. We're connecting them to community employment agencies like Gateway, like Employabilities or OSP. And the way that we support them is fairly varied, I would say. Sorry, in my notes here. So in addition to connecting them with employment agencies, we host something called Job Club every 2 weeks. So everyone kind of comes back together for maybe an hour, and the participants get to talk about their experiences in the job market. If they want any additional help with the application process, or if they want to practice like a mock interview, we can do those things for them at a job club. The only difference between job club and our classroom sessions is that job club is far less structured and it's much more participant led. So whatever they need help with for that week, we can absolutely do for them. A few of our clients have requested private meetings with us. So right now we're doing those over Zoom, which has been really neat. Sometimes all they want is to just talk about the different employment opportunities that are out there for them and kind of discuss their interests and delve into that a little bit deeper, which has been really cool to see. We also, of course, provide references for them on their resumes if that's what they would like. So just a little bit of a list of all the skills that we target during our employment work sessions, things like things that are kind of you would think of as obvious when we talk about employment programming. So resume writing, completing job applications, interviews, but things that we also cover things that you might not think about, things like self-care, your interests, how do you engage in small talk with your coworkers? Do you disclose your diagnosis? Do you not? How do you tell? Planning next steps. Talk a little bit about scheduling and little tiny bit about budgeting too, which is really cool.
Mhm. Let's pause on this page because I think this is, um, of course, some of these may not come as natural to caregivers as it comes to you, but I think we're talking about what are some aspects that caregivers could emulate in their homes, so, and get some practice going. These are some areas that could be targeted, right, when it comes to skills.
Mhm.
What would you suggest to a caregiver who's probably feeling, um, you know, it's harder to teach at home? Um, like, what are some tips you might have for them?
A lot of this stuff you can get naturally through engaging with other groups. So it doesn't have to necessarily be through any programming that's done at the center, but even if there's a group online that meets online to talk about if your teen or adult is interested in anime and they want to get together with a group and discuss that, or if there's book clubs or any kind of groups like that. A lot of these social skills can be gleaned in kind of an indirect way through peer modeling or through peer direction, that kind of stuff. Also, I would say that some of the soft skills and responsibilities and those kind of things can come from having chores and responsibilities at home. So we'll talk a little bit more about those kind of things when we get to Quest, but if they are expected to clean their room, or if they have a bathroom to themselves that you want them to start taking care of, those kind of things will work really well when it comes to learning those responsibilities that translate to the workplace. So that's what I would suggest is a good place to start at home, and especially in this climate, I guess, when there's not really the opportunity to go out and engage with a lot of people or with interest groups and that kind of thing. So that's a good place to start.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Community work. So community works covers a few similar things when it comes to employment, but this is targeted towards a younger group, 14 to 17 years old. So Community Works is a community-based pre-employment program with a focus on social communication skills development and independence. So it serves teens with ASD, and it pairs them alongside a neurotypical peer mentor. So the ratio in this group is a little bit higher. It's almost 1-to-1. So participants in Community Works can continue to learn and practice their social skills, and in particular, those social skills that are important in the workplace and in a community setting. So it generates awareness and promotes understanding and acceptance through community venues too, as Community Works, there's no real classroom session. It's strictly out in the community at places that typically have volunteers. So places like the food bank or Edmonton Humane Society. So this group will go for a couple hours to a volunteer site where the participants get to spend time doing the actual volunteer work alongside their peer mentors. And then they take breaks to go over some of those social skills that I talked a little bit about before. So they get a little bit of instruction through the staff and then time to practice in their groups and alongside their peer mentors, which is really cool. So the participants get to explore employment interests. They get to build relevant job experience. This is something that they can put on their resume for later on. It's an increase in their independence and overall enhancement of their quality of life. They can also successfully demonstrate the employability and the valued skill set of program participants and people with ASD in general, which benefits not only them, but the community partners that we associate with. It lends itself to an increased awareness of ASD within our communities. It's fantastic. So as you can see, some of the skills that we target are a little bit similar to those in employment works. We target things like workplace grooming and hygiene, which is important and something that people might not think about. How to problem solve, how to self-manage, things like good workplace manners, positive attitudes, participation, attendance and timeliness, punctuality, those kind of things. Very, very valuable skills. So a little bit, just touch on the peers and for teens and young adults. So peers means the program for education and enrichment of relational skills. So we have a cohort for teens ages 13 to 17 and for young adults who are ages 18 to 35. So it's a 16-week evidence-based social skills intervention for motivated teens and young adults. For those who want to learn new skills, learn how to make and keep friends, and if you are registered in the young adults program, even how to develop romantic relationships. So during each group session, teens and young adults are taught those important social skills, and then they're also given the opportunity to practice with each other. And something that's kind of neat about the peers program is that not only are the teens and young adults getting instruction, but the parents, for the teen group at least, are also getting instruction from a registered psychologist in tandem, which is really interesting. And then the teens and young adults go home and they have homework that they need to complete over the week, and then come back and report on it at the next class. So the homework might be something like have a phone conversation with one of your classmates, make sure you have a greeting, find a common interest, and then and appropriately end the conversation. So this program isn't directly employment related, but a lot of the skills that peers targets is really important in a workplace setting as well. Things like the appropriate use of humor, that is important in a workplace, absolutely. Handling disagreements, handling direct and indirect bullying, all of these are really important day-to-day skills and also lend itself to the workplace experience as well. So just a few little asterisks at the bottom, differences between the programs. So Peers for Teens covers things like good sportsmanship, but Peers for Young Adults will cover dating etiquette. And just a little touch on the Quest for Independence program. So Quest for Independence is an innovative post-secondary program for young adults with autism. Quest builds skills of independence for living. We participate in the community through vocational training, through volunteer and employment opportunities. Quest is, I would say, and Eva, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Quest is kind of like our teen and adult flagship program. It's definitely like the longest running program. We run year round, Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 3:30 under regular circumstances, of course. Right now we're managing on Zoom as best we can. So this program is one that focuses on the skills called adaptive functioning skills. So the skills that are necessary for us to navigate through the demands that are placed on us by our environments in a way that's effective. It might include skills like flexibility, skills like communication, skills that are very foundational to building those employment skills later on. So as we kind of touched on earlier, those independent activities of daily living, the adaptive functioning skills are one of the best predictors of independent employment status in adulthood, even after accounting for things like their personal characteristics and supports. So I kind of touched a little bit on the Weissman scale earlier. We typically give that out to families just to kind of gauge what their skill level is at, and then we meet those participants where they are. So we kind of take that scale and help them build on those adaptive functioning skills. And the neat thing about Quest is that there really is no end date. Of course, later on we'll have exit criteria and those kind of things, but we really get to dig in and really take the time and spend a lot of time with them to really build those skills, no matter where that participant might be at. Fantastic program. So the skills that Quest targets are based on something called the PDD quality of life framework. So we teach skills for independent living, including capacity skills, goal setting, self-management, nutrition skills, physical activities, recreation skills, those kind of things. And all of those skills that we target fall into the above domains of wellness. So PDD has suggested that in order to have a high quality of life, a person should be well versed in things like their personal development. They should know how to self-determine. They should have a solid understanding of their physical well-being, their material well-being. They should know what their rights are, and they should be versed in personal relations. They should have friends. They should know how to make friends. So Quest is really a good program to build those types of skills. So we might tackle some of these things by going to yoga or Zumba at a community rec center, a city rec center. They volunteer at Ronald McDonald House, at Meals on Wheels. A few of our participants have part-time jobs, and one is actually enrolled at McCune University. So although we don't accompany them to their jobs or accompany them to school, we support those kind of things in the background for them. Has been really fantastic for those participants. And then I will actually turn it over to Brady, as Brady is well versed in our rec programs.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Desiree about the employment stuff before we move on quick? Okay. If you have any questions at the end, that's okay too.
Brady,
so recreation comes.
Oh, sorry, Brady. Do you want to just let me know when to change slides?
Yeah. I'll let you know to click it. Yay, Zoom and remote access. So part of why we brought recreation into this conversation is because it's another great alternative for when you don't qualify for PDD. Because a lot of these, some of the programs we have for the adults are free, but some of them are not free and they come at quite high expense. to a family or an individual. So sometimes when we're interviewing a new individual or just meeting with them to get to know them because they haven't been to our center before, there's sometimes this hesitation because sometimes it's a lot of money to invest in a program when you don't know if it's a good fit. So what we'll do is we'll recommend participation in one of our adult recreation programs so they can kind of get used to the center, our culture, our environment, our staff, and it also helps us get to know them too, so then we can also recommend better fits for programming as well, because we can't always tell right off like a first meeting if something that they're asking about, like a program that they're asking about, is necessarily a good fit for them at this time, because maybe there's some base skills that we need to build upon, and something that's really critical that we need to look at from a really young age, so the teen years, is their ability to kind of participate in group programming. So you'll notice that a lot of our adult programs are all group programs, and that is a really critical skill that needs to be worked on from teenage years. When you still have that funding and that ability, and there's lots of great therapeutic and recreation group programs at that age. And that's because when the funding runs out from PDD, when they're adults and they don't qualify for PDD, there's also not a lot of funding from other sources either as adults. So our group programs run with very minimal staff. So there's no ability for one-to-one support. And usually the ratios are one staff to at least 3 or 4 participants. So it's important to focus on preparation of our teens to be able to function in an environment like that, or even our young adults too. So recreation is really important because it helps to also boost that quality of life for everyone. And if you think about kind of what we're experiencing now with COVID and everyone's at home, a lot of what people are doing to pass the time and keep their sanity is recreation and leisure, whether they're knitting or watching television programs or Zooming with people and being social and social distancing. It's kind of a realm that humans generally fall back on to help cope. And that's a really important strategy, and it's important to have those things in place so we can function. You can go ahead and skip to the next slide, Des. So a lot of the focus of recreation is usually fun and enjoyment and pleasure, but there are sub-skills that are acquired through participating in recreation programming. They're not always the main target because a lot of them are not clinical programming, but there's secondary skills like negotiation and cooperation, making choices as a group, voting on an activity, and coping when you have a disagreement. And there's a lot of great skills that come from it when it's in a supportive environment with staff that are trained to kind of fulfill that skill building. So it's a really nice, gentle nudge into maybe some of those more clinical programs. So if you're really uncertain, a rec program, which is usually highly motivating. So if you're putting your young adults into an art program because they really love art, but it's a structured program like the ones that we have, we're able to kind of feel out some of those skill deficits that there might be and some of those strengths. As Des said, those strengths are really important at the beginning, and we can identify those strengths through recreation programs and say, oh, you'd be really great at this. And then we can be more authentic in our encouragement about where to pursue and where to go with their programming. I just need to move the camera out of the way. There we go. So there's a lot of benefit in having your primary focus of fun. And that's kind of what I'm usually here to promote, is that fun's not always a bad thing. It can actually be a really good tool to transition to some really great skill development. Go ahead, Des. Yeah. So here's some of the 5 main benefits of participation in recreation. So quality of life. A lot of our participants with disabilities and on the spectrum particularly don't often have the ability to connect in recreation programs like they're typically developing peers. So being able to have some programs set aside so we can kind of work through some of that skill development, and eventually the goal is to transition just to like community programs. That's usually the ultimate goal, but sometimes you just need that little bit of a boost where you're sending your sons and daughters into a program where you know they're going to be well supported and understood, and then we can work through some of that skill development so they can go to a community-based program. And then part of kind of my job is to create outreach with those community programs to provide those community organizations with the tools and support and resources that they need to support individuals with disabilities or on the spectrum that may be participating in their programs, so we can make it more meaningful for everyone. But there's always social relationships and acceptance. The ABCs of leisure and recreation are autonomy, belonging, and competency. And those are 3 areas that are usually acquired when you're participating in some sort of interest-based program that recreation and leisure kind of targets. So there's finding people that have the same interests and finding joy in chatting with those people with the same interests. And that's how relationships and friendships typically form. Sometimes we'll see a decrease of like those socially deemed inappropriate behaviors because they're enjoying what they're doing. It's not a punishment, it's not homework. Usually if you're doing recreation and leisure, it's something that's like motivating for you. So you're less likely, anyone is less likely to be grumpy and unhappy and stressed and anxious when they're having access to their favorite things. Which if you're not enjoying your recreation and leisure, it's probably time to move on to something else. A lot of our recreation and leisure programs, even though we have some that are specifically physically targeting physical skills, but even just having a program where you go out and you're leaving the house and you're walking to a place, or you're standing and you're working at a counter, that can support your physical well-being because your body is still moving and it's still engaging. And then there's accessing the communities. So most leisure rec programs, when we're not in COVID, are out in the community. And so we're learning skills about how to take the bus there, and how to register for these programs, and how to be in the community with these programs. So there's a variety of really great skills that are developed from that. Go ahead, Des. Next. So next, we're kind of just gonna go through a quick breakdown of some of the areas of programs that we have. So we partner with the Nina Haggerty for our art programs. We have 3 different programs that run all day Saturday. So we've got the children, and then the teens, and then the young adults. We have an excellent partnership with them where the teens get to explore all kinds of different mediums of art. Lots of our teens and adults prefer certain areas of art, and so the staff there will work to really develop and enhance those skills, but they also encourage that flexibility piece in exploring other areas of art. Or say if they like drawing and that's their thing, maybe exploring drawing other characters instead of their favorite Nintendo character or something like that all the time. So we can slowly work on expanding that repertoire and that flexibility with something that they enjoy. And it's just slowly and slight nudging. And the arts are really great because there's not a lot of judgment in the art community because it's all about expression and self-expression. And so there's a lot of freedom and acceptance in an art program, which you don't get in a lot of other programs. So that's kind of the beauty about being in a societal area where being a little weird and unusual is a really good thing. So art's fantastic. Next, Des. Basketball. We found that basketball is a high interest area for a lot of our participants. So a lot of the rec programs, like specific rec programs that we have at the center, is based on feedback from families and participants about what their interests are. So a lot of our teens really love basketball and playing basketball. So we created a program for that. So it's all about kind of listening to where the need is. And this is one where we've got staff that some have a little bit of coaching experience. So they're working at developing teamwork and playing the game, because it's a really great game to be able to go outside, and if you see a group of teens that are the same age playing basketball, to easily slip in and join in. So that's where the skill development in basketball is kind of really important, and that's one of those like secondary skills that we develop. So when you increase your competence in something, you're more likely to join in with less fear and anxiety, because you know what you're doing and you understand the rules and the etiquette. So this program is kind of helped to kind of designed to help support that. Go ahead, Des. Cooking programs. Who doesn't love to eat? Right. Cooking is a really interesting area of recreation and leisure, because on one side it's enjoyable and creative, but it's also an essential skill. So we kind of hit a little bit of all of that. So who wouldn't want their teen to be able to like cook a simple meal for the family, so you can kind of take a break, and then but also have them enjoy it and pick the kind of the foods that they like and learn how to cook it properly and safely. And it's just kind of a win-win when it comes to supporting the home environment and the family. And then it also supports future social opportunities when you want to have people over to cook for your friends. What a great way to share something meaningful with a couple people that you really appreciate. So the cooking programs are kind of multifaceted in that way, and quite fun and delicious. Okay, next says. The social programs are quite enjoyable. So this is where we work in a lot of self-determination and autonomy in the social programs, to kind of get their ability to have a little bit of self-confidence. It's a really safe place where there's staff and there's volunteers that are kind of similar ages. We're out in the community. And so for our first session for our social programs, all three of them, so we have our Just for Teens and our Teen Social Night and our Young Adult Social Night. When they come into the first kind of meeting together, it's a big collaborative meeting about what are the things that they're interested in and what kinds of things do they want to do. And then the coordinator will go and kind of build a schedule for the rest of the sessions based on the feedback from the participants and what time of year it is and what's available. But there's a lot of opportunity to create some choice and control. And the secondary piece is to kind of encourage them to kind of build those social connections, share phone numbers, and start meeting outside of the program. Because when you don't have funding, you're going to need to create programming for your own. So building a good friend base and a good community base, and having that opportunity to practice and have staff that you can go back to and say, hey, I want to invite these people over, but I don't know how to do it. Then we can kind of work through it and give them some recommendations, and we can kind of help softly guide that and encourage it and support it. So they'll be more successful. So then when they're out of the program, they can invite their friends over and have those social functions and start kind of doing it on their own or with the support of their parents. And there's also a lot of community access for two of our programs. We have the Just for Teens programs is a social program for our individuals that need a little more support. So that's a higher staff to participant ratio. So that one's usually done at the center where it's a nice, safe space. They get a chance to kind of watch movies together and play games together without the parents having a lot of anxiety that they're going to be out of the community without enough support. Go on to the next one.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
That's okay.
It's not, there we go.
So I think that this is a summary for both of us. Hey, Des?
Mhm.
Yeah. So part of the growth that I'm hoping to achieve at the center coming into this new role, you'll see that we only have 3 programs for young adults. And we're looking at, especially now that we're in a culture of Zoom and social distancing and physical distancing, is how can we expand these programs affordably to provide more access to across the lifespan for recreation, and for people that, because programming can be expensive, especially when you don't have a job or financial supports from PDD, ways to kind of like improve that affordability and capture more interest and make more of those connections for recreation anyway. Go ahead, Des, take her away.
Perfect. Brady, I think you nailed it. I'll just share, there was a question in the chat from Kiri. Thanks for asking. She just wanted to know if oh, Eva, I see you've answered that. So Kiri just wanted to know if there was a particular field of work or a particular industry that our participants found higher rates of employment with. And one of our community partners, Technology North, has been hiring a lot of our employment works guys, which is really encouraging. But she's right, it's totally participant dependent. It's really encouraging to see the depth of industries that our participants have been finding employment with. We have some who have degrees from NATE with the radio and television arts program, and so work for Bell Media. Some found actually volunteer positions with Alberta Archives, I think is what it is. We have some that work for PepsiCo, some that have applied at Goodwill and No Frills and Superstore, liquor store. What else? Oh gosh, yeah, quite a breadth of places that they've found employment with, which is fantastic. Oh, Grace Distributors. Eva wrote it on the sheet. I just needed to read. Yeah, absolutely. The Greg's Distributors is really fantastic. That place is very I don't want to say strict. They have a really functional system that works well for them, but
They're super structured.
yes, super
Yeah.
structured, Brady, totally. And one of our participants just took to it and is flourishing. So very exciting for them.
Sometimes too, when you have those questions about what is a good fit and what is a good job, participating in these programs, they do a lot of career investigation. So that's a really great way to find out what a good fit is doing the community works and doing the employment works, because you're doing a lot of job sampling in a variety of areas. They're doing a lot of work and questionnaires and discussion about what do you enjoy, what are you good at, what are your strengths. So sometimes to answer that question, the best thing to do is join in and find out.
Exactly, and almost equally as important, I would say, is finding out what you don't want.
Yes.
Because if you haven't right, because if you haven't been in the workforce, or if you haven't had a part-time job before, it's really hard to know what you do or do not want if you just don't even know what the options are. So as much as it's important to find out what the things you like are, it's also important to find out what you don't want, so that you can kind of set those boundaries and those filters for yourself when you do find time to start applying for jobs.
Mm-hmm. A question I have is just based on your experience, what are some signs of employment readiness that you look for? in an individual?
I think that's a good question. It varies from person to person, and it also depends on what kind of job they're looking for too. Some jobs require a higher degree of social competency. So if that's something that they're interested in and that they're looking for, in order for them to be employment ready, they would have to work on those skills a lot more. But some jobs don't. So employment readiness for those jobs might look quite different. It might look like punctuality. It might look like willingness to learn. It might look like a willingness to work with other people or work through a disagreement and persist even if the outcome isn't what they expected. Those kind of things we definitely touch on during employment works. So as much as it's important to have those hard skills, like really great interview skills, a really great knowledge of how to write a proper resume, it's also really important to be able to function socially in a workplace, because we often take for granted how important those skills are. As much as there are employers out there who are accommodating and willing to work with people with differing abilities, a lot of the times that might not be the case. So it's really important that in order to be ready for employment, that you have those soft skills as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a good indicator of that is sometimes an individual's ability to function in a group program with minimal support. So if you're requiring a program where they need one-to-one aid, employment might not be the right time just yet.
Mm-hmm.
But volunteering might be a really good fit at that point, right? And then working up towards needing the less support where you could work beside a coworker. So any kind of group programming and the ability to attend and participate and enjoy it without a whole ton of support is a really good key. Plus, an individual expressing their desire to have a job is huge. Because we got a lot of teens that are like, I don't want a job, that come to Community Works, and the program isn't successful. So having that teen or young adult that's acknowledging that, you know what, I think I'm kind of ready, or they're asking questions about it, or like, my friends have jobs but I don't. Those are some really good indicators. Or they're getting restless and you're giving them chores and they're excited to have chores and take on chores and do more and participate more. Those are good indicators that employment's kind of on the horizon.
Absolutely.
In that case, I'm really surprised I have a job because I hate chores. I'm so glad that somebody decided, doesn't matter, Sahana doesn't do chores, he or she.
And the benefit to those things that Brady just mentioned, I guess that the benefit to all of you guys is that Community Works and Quest for Independence and Employment Works, we provide those opportunities. So they're group programs. They get everyone's toes in the water when it comes to volunteering and sampling employment with either 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 support. Even Employment Works, the participants that come to that program are working right alongside the employees of that organization. So us as staff at Employment Works, we kind of take a step back and we're there to support the organization's employees, but really those participants get to learn and take advantage of the knowledge of the actual employees that they're working alongside. So that's a really great opportunity for them to realize, okay, I'm ready for this type of work. Here's what it actually is. Here's what is like actually expected of me in a workplace, and then determine whether or not they feel ready for their own employment.
Mm-hmm. A couple of questions. One, these programs that you mentioned, are there aspects to are there times carved out for reflection, whether in a group or one-on-one on, emotions and thoughts and how they overcame that and some peer reflection?
Yeah. Something that's really great about Employment Works is that we do a lot of goal setting. So before their shift starts, they set a goal for themselves, a SMART goal. Okay, today at my shift, I'm going to strike up a conversation with 2 new people. And then at the end of the day, we can talk a little bit about their shift, see if they met their goal. If they didn't, why not? It's no problem. It's just a learning experience. They get to chat with us a little bit about how they thought the work was, if they could see themselves working in a place like this. They get to give us feedback on the types of community partners that we go to and that kind of stuff. So after every job sampling shift, they get moments for reflection with us. And then during the classroom sessions the following week, we get to ask for their feedback again. So there's lots of good opportunities to reflect on their job sampling experiences for sure.
Okay. My second question was, diversity is the future of all work, right? I mean, in fact, we think we are supporting persons with different abilities, but actually we need them to prepare ourselves for a future that we don't know yet. And so have you, with that in mind, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of diversity in terms of the strengths of the participants in the programs. Is there room for participants, or have you seen any time in the past that they have suggestions for employers or that place of work that perhaps that employer hadn't thought of, and that's actually building innovation into the workplace? How do you guys kind of create room for that? If you do, sorry, don't mean to.
No, that's okay. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any moments we've had, and I'm sure there have been, but for whatever reason, it's just not coming to me. Eva and Brady, maybe you guys can remember a moment like this, but I can't remember any moments where the participants have given us any feedback for the employers directly. But we definitely do hear from employers talking to us about how easy it was to incorporate our participants and their skill sets into their workplace, which is really encouraging. Our contact with Evolve Strength, who it's a gym chain in the city, was absolutely blown away by the skills that our participants displayed and the level of competency that they displayed with very minimal training, and he was just very excited about it. So we do hear some really great positive feedback from our community supports.
Mm-hmm.
We did have.
Go ahead.
Well, we did have one organization as well who, not necessarily out of feedback from the participants, but based on their observations, there was a fitness center, Good Life Fitness, one of the managers, through the program, actively sought out grants to be able to hire people with differing abilities. So we started seeing stuff like that when we first introduced the program. And the programs are still pretty young, but I thought that was really cool that we're kind of seeing that momentum in the community now.
I know one example I can think of with one of our participants in Employment Works was, and this is before you were involved, Jess, but we were working at Goodwill, and he was just, I don't know if you know how Goodwill Industries work, but in the background, you're kind of going through people's donations. That's what the staff in the back do, and then they put them out on the floor for sale. So in the back, our group was in there, and one of our participants actually just became aware of a really valuable comic book set that was being thrown out by the employees there, and he had brought it to the attention of the manager to say, hey, I found these, and these are actually valuable items. Like they shouldn't go to the recycle. And he did it on his own, and he approached the manager, and they couldn't have been more grateful, like with this guy, that he was aware of that, and they were just so grateful to him, and he had the skill set to just go ahead and approach management and take it to him, and for sure. But companies like what was known as Meticulon in Calgary, that hires exclusively people on the spectrum for computer and various technical type of jobs. I've heard companies speak of these employees as, just completely opening their minds, and they often do their best to steal these employees from Meticulon to just come and work in terms of their ability to problem solve and do various things. So there's so many stories out there like that, for sure, that we do hear about a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. I believe that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions for the speakers? Awesome. I think Kitty also left a comment. She said, great points, very well thought out programming.
Good.
Awesome.
I have a question. So if we wanted to get in contact with you and potentially bring like a youth to kind of decide and kind of check out some of your programs, would we I guess right now, would we just go online, or post-COVID, would we come to the Center of Autism Alberta?
Yeah, definitely send us an email, and then we can reply back and send you guys all the information on the programs that you're interested in. So we have flyers for everything. So that's what I would do right now. And get back to you pretty quick.
Our website's a great place to go as well, but post-COVID, for sure, we would love to have you in and kind of explore and talk. And oftentimes Brady and myself will meet with somebody that's new, that's interested in potentially rec or therapeutic programs, and we kind of sit down and we chat with the teen or young adult, and me or Brady will chat with the family member and just kind of get a feel for what they're looking for, and try to help them on their journey to find something. But yeah, that's kind of the post-COVID thing, for sure. But in the meantime, definitely shoot us emails, because then you're on our radar, and when things start to open up, we can reach out.
Awesome.
And the teen and adult email that's on the screen now is good for any of our teen and adult programs. So that's one email box that Eva, myself, and Desiree all have access to. So that they get sorted based on kind of requests. So whether you're looking for employment, social programming, or recreation, it's a one-stop shop.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the recording pretty soon. Thank you, Santa, for being available today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.